Hello and welcome to the latest in my series of musings on my favourite science fiction novels. So this is number 11 in this series, which is awesome. And many thanks to those of you who have watched the previous ones and have left me feedback and discussion on those. I appreciate it very much, and if you're new to the channel, I hope you enjoy this video and consider subscribing. So just a quick note that as always there will be some spoilers ahead, but I will attempt to avoid the critical details. Now, I've been mulling this one over for a while, but I'd like today to tackle an entire series, not just a single book from that series. I debated whether this was perhaps too much to bite off in a relatively short video, but in this case I don't think I want to separate any of the individual novels, as I think it's the series as a whole that has the significant impact. So today I want to talk about the epic story arc that is E.DocSmith's Lensman series. Now, this groundbreaking series eventually came to comprise 6 core novels plus an adjacent side novel and some subsequent continuations by other authors. It had a complex evolution into the final set of books we know today, but its original genesis as a series started way back in 1937 with the story that would become Galactic Patrol being serialized in Amazing Stories. So this makes it the oldest story in my series so far, I believe. Now, Edward Elmer Smith, shortened to E.DocSmith, was an American author from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, who was born in 1890. He lived for 75 years, passing away in 1965. And as well as a writer, he was a PhD in chemical engineering with a focus on food engineering. He began writing science fiction as far back as 1916, although didn't have any works published until 1927, but he can truly be considered a pioneer of modern science fiction. I totally endorse calling him the father of space opera, and I believe that all subsequent entries in this genre, for example Asimov's Galactic Empire, Dune, Ender's Game, The Expanse, and many others, owe the Lensman series a debt, as do televised sagas such as Star Trek and Babylon 5, and even games such as Mass Effect. Interestingly enough, the term space opera was meant originally as an insult, which again shows critics are out of touch with the public, who have consistently loved sweeping galaxy-wide epic series. So let's examine the core Lensman series more closely. The books in narrative order are Triplanetary, First Lensman, Galactic Patrol, Grey Lensman, Second Stage Lensman, and Children of the Lens. Now, Triplanetary was originally written as an unrelated story but was repurposed as a Lensman prequel, with First Lensman written to link it and the first book proper in the series that was written, which was Galactic Patrol. And it's fascinating to think to me that the writing of these stories all happened over 70 years ago. They still seem so fresh, even though I first read them back in the 1970s. And by the way, there is a school of thought that the best reading order is not the order that I listed above, but to start with the original Galactic Patrol, work through to Children of the Lens, then read the prequels, Triplanetary and First Lensman. It's a reader's choice though, I wouldn't recommend either one, just as long as you read them all. Now, the scale of these stories is enormous, I guess hence the tag space opera that was subsequently added, spanning 2 billion years and set across 2 galaxies, one which is our galaxy, called the First Galaxy, and an adjacent colliding second galaxy. And within those, 2 ancient alien races vie for supremacy. The Arisians are the good guys and are largely non-corporeal and have developed prodigious mental powers. Pitted against them are the bad guys, the Eddorians. The Eddorians invade our space-time continuum from their own, looking for new species to dominate, as their own continuum lacks species to enslave, as it's very poor in planets. They are inherently evil and lust for power and control. And the trigger for them to invade our continuum is the coming together of the two galaxies, which causes a formation of billions of new planets, and therefore the development of multiple new species that the Eddorians wish to enslave. Now, the Eddorians too have, like the Arisians, strong mental powers, but they've also got a lot of physical capability too, and they control a number of equally ruthless client species, who are all introduced throughout the books as a succession of more formidable enemies for the good guys. Now, the Arisians are careful to remain hidden from Eddor, but they realise they cannot defeat the Eddorians alone and all the client species that they control, and they need to intervene to speed the development of some of the infant species in our own galaxy in order to gain assistance in the battle. 4 planets in particular are chosen for genetic and mental uplifting, which is Valentia 3, Rigel 4, Helene 7, and Planet Earth, our very own Planet Earth. All radically different species inhabit these planets environmentally, physically, and in demeanour, but the leading species on each, in our case of course humans, all fundamentally support the ideas of peaceful, free civilization, so making them ideal for uplifting by the Arisians. The aim of the Arisians is to make these species able to defend themselves against Eddor by raising their mental and technological capability, in effect giving them super science eventually, and by encouraging them to forge alliances across the galaxy to fight the bad guys. To assist in this, they gift the most capable of the allied species individuals something called the Lens. The Lens is a crystalline bracelet which amplifies mental powers, and Lens wearers form the basis of a new cross-species Galactic Patrol, who can now communicate with each other easily and combine to enforce law and order in the galaxy, to identify the client races of Eddor and to begin to push back on them and free the species they've enslaved. The client races that work for the Eddorians, they use a sadistic authoritarian control and indeed ordinary organised crime to achieve their ends. And thus the battle for the galaxy is joined. The war itself progresses over centuries, first in local star systems, then across the entire galaxy. Lens wearers continue to develop their powers and skills, and indeed in time pass those on to their children. And the lens wearers of the Galactic Patrol also engage in infiltration and subterfuge on enemy planets, often at great risk of physical and mental torture if captured. There is a large-scale action-adventure component to these parts of the books, which you can see influenced hugely properties like Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon, which came into being not long after. Large-scale fleets of spaceships from opposing sides join in battle as well, with the powers of the Lens offering a mental edge in these battles to the Allied forces. And there are increasingly expansive descriptions of the growing mental powers of the Lensmen across the generations. So these stories describe some of the most prodigious space battles imaginable. Really big. You just won't believe how vastly, hugely, mind-bogglingly big these battles are. Whole fleets of thousands of ships and multiple planets are destroyed. I guess world-shattering isn't strong enough to describe these events. They're just so huge. In fact, in reading the books, I began to fear for the author that he would run out of adjectives to describe these battles eventually, and there wouldn't be enough words for big or impactful available. He uses every adjective you can possibly imagine. Each book, in effect, is a series of climax and then anticlimaxes building to another higher climax, and they are rollicking, action-packed, twisty-turny sagas, so be prepared. There are bold heroes and heroines and evil, sadistic villains, and every form of alien species you can picture or imagine. I have to say my favourite character is not the clean-cut Earth hero Kim Kinnison, but the dragon-like Wurzel from Valentia 3, who manages to be both warm and cuddly and deadly at the same time. He is an absolutely beautiful character. Ultimately, no one can deny that these books are dated. And how can they not be, given they're approaching 100 years old in some cases? Also, they were so groundbreaking at the time that there were no rules for how such an expansive science fiction saga should be written. The episodic magazine roots of some of these stories also show up from time to time in the structure and pacing, because many of them were serialised before being compiled into the novels. But they remain rip-roaring fun, full of swashbuckling adventure and the satisfaction at each turn of the bad guys being vanquished by the good guys in prodigious fashion, which is, prodigious is a word that appears many times in these books. Now, the Lensman series set a template for future genres in science fiction, such as space opera, super science, space action, military science fiction, mind powers, alternative worlds, future history, and many, many more. So for that reason alone, I would recommend you read them. They truly are a historic and pivotal series in the genre. Smith also wrote an adjacent novel, Masters of the Vortex, which is somewhat connected to the Lensman series. And then David Kyle also wrote 3 Lensman novels, one of which, The Dragon Lensman, about Wurzel, I've actually just reread and I really love it, and he really captured the E.DocSmith style extremely well. There have been tabletop game, comic and anime adaptations, but despite some attempts to get film adaptations off the ground, including by Ron Howard, nothing has materialised yet, and a huge barrier to this, I think, has been cost. It would be an exceptionally expensive movie or series of movies to make. And there's actually a number of parodies of this series, and one of my favourite novels, in fact, of all time, is Harry Harrison's Star Smashers of the Galaxy Rangers, which is a Lensman, self-admitted Lensman parody. But there's nothing wrong with that because it's a fantastic book. Well, that about wraps it up for the Lensman books. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this musing on this classic science fiction series, and I look forward to discussing it with anybody in future if they're interested in chatting about that. I will be back soon with another science fiction classic. Till then, stay well and remember to look to the future.